the years, Pixar has been known for their incredible attention to detail in their films and their ability to sneak in any number of little Easter eggs. And their latest feature, Soul, that recently released on Disney Plus, is no different. Since Soul is a movie about life and the little things that make it worth living, there's really much more going on than just a funny little body-jumping mishap. From the expected web of references that stretches all across Pixar's body of work, to numerous shout-outs to famous people and some interesting design choices. Soul is filled to the brim with tiny little details that you may not notice on a first watch, where you're entirely too busy being wrapped up in all the existentialism that pours out of literally every frame. Luckily, that's why we're here. We're gonna comb through Soul for a whole bunch of interesting little things that you might have missed. Considering that the only other numbered soul mentioned in the movie is somewhere in the hundreds of billions, we can assume that 22 is an old soul. But there's actually a deeper meaning to the number. 22 wants to avoid having to be born, but can only do so by getting rid of their personality sticker. That can only be done by turning it into an Earth ticket, which can only happen once its owner discovers a desire to live. And wouldn't you know it, there's a term for this kind of unsolvable problem, namely, a catch-22 dilemma. Soul is the first Pixar film to not receive a theatrical release, instead releasing on Disney Plus in December 2020 due to, let's just say, worldwide conditions. This results in one part of the movie aging like milk. At the very end of the credits, Terry will pop up and tell the viewer,
"Hi! Movie's over! Go home!"
What would have been an amusing shout out to Ferris Bueller's Day Off in theaters thus ends up becoming little more than an awkward reminder at home. Whoops. This is extra odd when you spot a different credits joke. While Soul was in development long before anyone could have known what working conditions in 2020 would be like, there is a part of the credits that read, created and produced at Pixar Studios and in homes at least 6 feet away from each other in the Bay Area. Why this was added yet no one thought to put a muzzle on Terry is anyone's guess. There's an early line in the movie that foreshadows Joe's fate in two very different ways. When first informed that he has a shot at playing with a big shot jazz star, Joe remarks that,
"I would die a happy man if I could perform with Dorothea Williams."
And as we all know, he does, shortly after getting the job. But after he actually got to play the gig and finds it oddly underwhelming, Joe vows to live the rest of his life to the fullest, and will most likely eventually indeed die a happy man. One of the movie's major lessons is that while ambition is perfectly fine, it's not the only meaning of life itself. Joe ends up going on a wacky adventure that forces him, and by extension the audience, to learn this lesson the hard way. But much like how he should have paid more attention in life, he could have learned this less than 20 minutes into the movie, as Jerry actually explains the true meaning of the spark very early on.
"And just what is this spark?"
Joe simply doesn't listen. You didn't really think that Jerry's would just forget to clarify something that essential, would you?
Oh, you mentors and your passions, your purposes, your meanings of life. So basic.
A running gag in the film is that 22 has had many famous mentors, some of which get name-dropped and shown directly, such as Carl Jung, Muhammad Ali, and Abraham Lincoln. But if you pause the movie to take a look at 22's wall of mentor name tags, you can find quite a few interesting ones. These include Joan of Arc, Martin Luther King Jr., comic book artist Jack Kirby, and Disney legends such as Joe Grant and Joe Ranft. Fittingly enough, for a movie titled Soul, you can also spot soul singer Aretha Franklin. Now that's respect if I ever saw it. Speaking of musical idols, Dorothea Williams is apparently so popular an artist that her music transcends realities. In Pixar's earlier film Onward, which takes place in a world where our modern-day society was built on top of a Tolkien-esque fantasy world and is now inhabited by elves, centaurs, fairies, and more, you can spot one of her CDs in the Lightfoot household. Who knows? Maybe that's the music that Mr. Lightfoot is actually doing his dorky dad dance to. I mean, it's not like he can hear that music player anyways with no head, right? When Joe first arrives in the Great Beyond, he meets quite a few other recently deceased souls. But for Korean-speaking viewers, there's one soul in the bunch that might have died in an extra embarrassing way. When a panicking Joe is forcing his way through the crowd of souls, the soul of a Korean woman yells, "I'm not wearing pants," and quickly covers up her nethers. Sure, all the souls are designed to look like little bean people, but nobody else seems to mind their apparent nudity. So I'll just let you guys imagine what she might have been up to before she passed. At one point, Joe, in a cat's body, drags a slice of pizza through the streets of New York. only to meet a rat doing the exact same thing. You might think that this is a reference to Remy from Ratatouille, but that's not all there is to it. It's actually a shout out to the popular pizza rat video that stand-up comedian Matt Little posted on YouTube in 2015, where a rat drags a slice of pizza down the stairs at First Avenue L Station in Manhattan. Matt jokes in the description that this must have been Master Splinter trying to feed his 4 teenage sons. And now I can't help but imagine that Shredder and the Turtles are fighting on a rooftop somewhere while Joe is playing jazz. New York is a wild place, man. There's no denying it. Moonwind and his band of mystics, while very successful at healing lost souls, are basically one giant hippie joke. And if the 10 die sales on their ship somehow don't tip you off to this immediately, there's another huge tell about them before we as much as hear any of their totally groovy names. That song they're listening to when we see them rescue Joe in 22, that's the famous Subterranean Homesick Blues by counterculture icon Bob Dylan, in his first top 40 charting song and one of the earliest songs in general to get what is essentially a music video. Since we're talking about Moonwind and his crew anyways, we might as well bring up the name of their little outfit. Mystics Without Borders. Mystic is a broad term for people who believe in perceiving a state of reality that goes beyond the physical world. But the name is also a reference to a real-life group, Doctors Without Borders, a non-governmental humanitarian group of doctors, nurses, and other medical and environmental experts who travel across the world to help in areas of crisis. Considering they essentially offer therapy to lost souls regardless of location in the physical world, it's a very fitting name indeed. The fact that Joe ends up in a cat body might seem like an overused comedy trope. And sure, in universe, it's purely an accident. But it's actually very fitting for a die-hard jazz musician like Joe to become a cat. After all, cat is a very common slang for a jazz musician, like a cool cat or the like. In fact, like almost everything in Soul, it's brought up early on, as his former student uses the term when he first introduces Joe to Dorothea.
Hey, Dorothea. This the cat I was telling you about.
Would he perhaps have ended up in a dog body if the movie had been about early 90s rap music? The world will never know. Speaking of the cat, there's a little odd inconsistency that may be explained by another common saying. When Joe and 22 leave the great beyond to return to Earth, Joe somehow ends up inside of the therapy cat lying in his body's lap. To explain how this happened, we briefly get a humorous clip of the cat's slightly confused soul sitting on the escalator to the afterlife, implying that it just happened to die at the same time. Yet later, when Joe eventually regains his own body, the cat is seen alive and well. How is this possible? Well, you know what they say about cats, right? They all have 9 lives, of course. The Tubby Tabby just spent one of his, that's all. One of the patrons in Dez's barbershop is a younger man named Paul, who keeps mocking Joe for his failed music career. 22 is quick to deduce that this is simply because Paul is trying to cover up his own musical failures. If only 22 knew that in a bit of an ironic tongue-in-cheek casting, Paul is actually voiced by the very successful actor and musician Daveed Diggs, who is known for his roles in the Broadway play Hamilton and movies such as Wonder and Blindspotting. Well, if they knew that, they might just sing a different tune. And now for some classic prop recycling. There's nothing Pixar movies love more than dumping references to their earlier work absolutely everywhere, and the Hall of Everything contains a boatload of them. There is, of course, the ever-present Pizza Planet truck and A113, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg. You'll have to pause the movie to look close to catch them all. But among other things, you can spot the Spirit of Adventure from Up hanging in the sky along with the Axiom from WALL-E, just to name some of the more obvious examples. You probably already know that the lamp in the Pixar logo originates from one of Pixar's earliest short films, Luxo Jr. from 1986, where a cute little baby table lamp ends up squishing the ball it spends the whole short playing with. While not only does the lamp itself appear in the Hall of Everything, the ball can also be found in the movie, though it can be a little hard to spot. Still, pay attention when 22 shows off their little cardboard box home to Joe early on in the film, and you'll spot a familiar looking ball tucked away. Perhaps 22 is trying to prevent it from getting killed by Luxo Jr. Again. When a Jerry explains to the mentors that newborn souls may find their spark in the Hall of Everything by trying out various activities, we see one soul being ecstatic to hit the bullseye on 3 targets in a row while practicing with a bow and arrow. This is exactly what Merida did herself in the Pixar fantasy film Brave, when she schools her rather pathetic gaggle of would-be suitors at the archery contest, just with slightly less Robin Hooding. Could this be the soul of our fiery Scottish Pixar princess? Pixar universe theorists, Place your bets. You'd think that the Hall of Everything would be the one-stop shop for every Pixar prop present in the film. Say that 10 times fast. But you'd be wrong. There is one iconic prop that is seen primarily in the world of the living, and that would be the Chinese takeout box, a prop that is almost as prolific as the Pizza Planet truck. First seen in A Bug's Life as a makeshift circus prop, it has since appeared in Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., and Ratatouille, and in both dinner scenes in Inside Out and Incredibles 2. It's sort of blink and you miss it, but you can spot it on the hedge fund manager's desk, and later when 22 in Joe's body knocks over a garbage bin in New York City. Alright, let's try and cram one more Pixar prop into this movie. Remember Inside Out? And remember how one of the reasons the family had to move in the first place was due to Riley's dad being part of a tech startup called Brang? Well, if you were worried about the future of that company, you needn't be, as 5 years later they're apparently doing well enough to be able to afford ads on the subway, judging by the banner that you can barely see when Joe and 22 try to make it across town. Good for them. While we're on the subway, take a closer look at the subway card Joe and 22 get on after meeting the guitarist. It has a nice big 2319 written right there. If that number sounds familiar, it's because that's the code for a human contaminant alert heard early on in Monsters Inc., the first movie Peter Docter directed at Pixar.
2319! We have a 2319!
And I mean, it is the New York subway after all. That certainly qualifies as human contaminant. It's common knowledge that Pixar loves to leave a little call forward to their next movie. Heck, we've already pointed out the album in Onward, so it's no surprise that Soul includes a reference to the studio's next film, Luca, a coming-of-age story set in the Italian Riviera, currently slated for June 2021. In one window, you can see a travel agency ad telling the buyer to fly Luca Airlines. I wonder if you fly there on one of Disney Toon's planes. Or do we not talk about those? You know what? Yeah, let's not talk about those. While Pixar sort of does their own thing independently at Walt Disney Studios, they are nonetheless a part of Disney, and it shows. Early on in the film, when Joe is mistaken for a child psychologist, he and 22 briefly visits the Doctor's Hall of You, where we're treated to a few glimpses of his illustrious life. This includes the statue of the good doctor holding a child's hand, pointing off to the horizon as if towards a brighter future. Now, this statue's pose is almost completely identical to the partner statue found in various Disney parks across the world, which shows Walt himself holding the hand of that famous little mouse that kicked it all off, as if showing him all the things they'll accomplish together, or all of the things that they'll someday own, which is everything. Another time-honored Pixar tradition is the actor John Ratzenberger getting at least one role in every Pixar movie. His parts so far have included Ham in the Toy Story films, The Abominable Snowman, and P.T. Flea, just to name a few. But curiously, he is not actually credited in Soul, leading many to believe the tradition had finally been broken. Thankfully, that's not actually true, but he is pretty well hidden. When Joe is in his own Hall of You, reliving the painful memories of his various failed auditions, we hear many voices telling him the bad news. And among them, you can briefly hear Ratzenberger. It may be his smallest role yet.
We're looking for something different.
But with the film's themes of not letting your ambition or your failures define you, it's certainly no less impactful. One of the most striking things about Soul is the design of the Jerrys, the universal forces that help assign newborn souls their personalities. They truly look otherworldly and unique, but they aren't just randomly abstract. They share quite a few similarities with many of the famous painter Pablo Picasso's portraits, most notably the tendency to put both eyes on one side of their nose. One of them also bears a resemblance to the modern version of the Kokopelli figure, a Native American fertility deity who is also depicted as the spirit of music. If I didn't know better, I'd be tempted to say music is a big theme in this movie or something. In fairness, this last one may be a bit of a coincidence, but it's worth pointing out all the same. Of all the abstract figures in The Great Before, Terry sticks out quite a bit from the Jerrys. While she shares their overall traits, such as the lines, she is much shorter and more angular in design than the softer, more rounded Jerrys. And when moving around in the world of living, she does so by scurrying along a straight line. All of this is very reminiscent of the simplistic Italian cartoon character known as La Linea, literally meaning the line, created by Osvaldo Cavaldoli in 1969, who would walk along a line and interact with things drawn on it along the way. Whether this is on purpose or not, it certainly helps Terry stick out from all the rest. The fantasy genre is bigger today than it's probably ever been, with shows like Game of Thrones and The Witcher capturing audiences' imaginations, despite the former having left fans with a bad taste in their mouths after the final season. And heck, Dungeons & Dragons is incredibly popular today, only becoming more so by the minute due to the rise of live-streamed games such as those done by the Critical Role guys. So naturally, Disney and Pixar have moved in to capitalize on the genre's rise in popularity, with the latest film, Onward. Onward gives us a look at a fantasy world that's a bit different from what we're used to, in that it is significantly more modernized, and it does a much better job with the concept than some other films, like that one on Netflix.
Fairy lives don't matter today.
Woof. Anyways, with a world that has such a deep history as the one we see in Onward, and such a major connection to a very specific genre, you wouldn't be wrong to expect a slew of different Easter eggs and references. And in this video, I'm gonna talk about a handful of these little details that you might not have seen while you were busy enjoying the story of two kids trying to reunite with their dead dad via magical means. So come along with me as I lead you on an adventure through the fantastical world of Onward. Everybody, roll for initiative. Let's start off this list of Onward Easter eggs and details by talking about an Easter egg that isn't even in the movie, but another one entirely. For a long time now, Pixar has made it a tradition to hint at future film projects by including an Easter egg in their movies. A good example is seeing Lotso Huggenbear in Up before he debuted as the main antagonist in Toy Story 3. And this is no different for Onward, which was teased via a small Easter egg in Toy Story 4. At the fair, take a look at the top of the bouncy castle. There, you will see a very familiar looking Pegasus. Yep, the Pegasus there is the same one that we see in Onward on the side of the van our heroes use during the film. The references to beloved fantasy properties begin right off the bat at the beginning of the movie. As we're being told of the old ways of the world, of the magic that used to be basically everywhere, we see a wizard doing some awesome magical stuff, including what looks to be a fireworks spell. This character looks a lot like an Onwardified version of the quintessential wizard character within popular culture. Yep, he is a direct reference to Gandalf the Grey from J.R.R. Tolkien's work, including The Hobbit, and of course, The Lord of the Rings. The gray robes, pointy hat, and long beard are pretty generic at this point, but that staff, that seals it as a straight up Gandalf reference, as it looks almost identical to the one Gandalf used before he fought the Balrog and became Gandalf the White. During that same sequence, we get a shot that shows us a bunch of fantasy people watching the magical show. Among the crowd, you can see what looks like a troll from the Frozen films and a small character who you might recognize. The character appears similar to Bonnie, the little girl from Toy Story 3 who Andy gave the toys to, the girl who wound up being the main child for the film's sequel, Toy Story 4. Gotta wonder what she's doing in the magical world of Onward and how she got changed into that magical creature. Was there a crazy portal or something that she fell into while playing with Forky? Either way, she definitely seems to be enjoying the show that the wizard is putting on. Onward has a lot of connections to the more nerdy pursuits, which is kinda to be expected, since the fantasy genre in general has always been considered one of the more geeky things in existence, only really becoming mainstream as of late. And I mean, yeah, The Lord of the Rings certainly helped a bit back in the early 2000s, but it didn't bring the genre to the level of acceptance that it has today. Anyways, in Onward, we see that Barley is quite enamored by a very complex looking game that includes cards that appear somewhat similar to the most popular trading card game of all time, Magic the Gathering. Magic, or MTG if you're feeling nasty, first popped up back in 1993 with the Alpha set, which was quickly followed by the improved Beta and Unlimited sets, and has been going strong ever since, releasing multiple expansion sets every year. I've actually played a crap ton of Magic in my personal life, having first slung some spells back in 1997. It's incredibly fun, and you should totally check it out if you're at all interested in some nerdy goodness. Plus, the art is just amazing, which is a huge bonus. Another nerdy property that the game Barley Likes references is one that you just had to know was going to pop up somewhere. That, of course, being Dungeons and Dragons. The rulebook for the Magic Quest game looks a lot like the Dungeons and Dragons sourcebooks, which themselves have often been designed to look like older magic scrolls or tomes, at least like 3rd edition and older tried to. In addition to the just general overall look of the book, there's also a small little section down in the corner that has rules for specific stats, such as strength, dexterity, constitution, and wisdom. These are actually 4 of the 6 main stats that D&D uses. The 2 missing ones are intelligence and charisma. So I guess that once again, Onward shows us that charisma is indeed the biggest of dump stats, since they dumped it so hard it doesn't even seem to exist in this fictional game at all. Of course, being a Pixar joint, the film doesn't just have references to beloved fantasy-related things like Dungeons and Dragons or Lord of the Rings, but also to other Pixar pieces. With Ian's 16th birthday coming up, we get a look at a calendar that he has been marking down the days on. This calendar has a picture on it, and while you would expect some sexy firefighters or kittens, which seem to be the only type of calendars that you can really get today, instead it has a picture of a wooded area. That wooded area is actually the woods that Merida follows the Will-O-Wisps into in the 2012 film Brave. Now, that's a nice little nod to Pixar's other fantasy flick. Now, this is not the only reference to Brave that we see in Onward. There is another one that appears as a sort of blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. When Barley and Ian are taking a look at the map, trying to find their way to the gem, in the upper left-hand corner of the map, there is a forest-like region that is simply referred to as the Brave Wilderness. The forest setting, and of course the name, immediately make us think of the densely wooded areas that we saw in the 2012 film, which itself took place somewhere in an area that was physically similar to the Scottish Highlands. Guess what though? That's not the only reference that this map gives us either. Up near the Brave Wilderness, just slightly to the southeast, is a small little body of water simply called Loch Lake. Now this name, and close proximity to an area based on a film set in Scotland, probably immediately conjures up in your mind images of the famous Loch Ness, the place where that giant sea creature allegedly lives. It could also be a reference to the 2011 Disney short, The Ballad of Nessie, which was a traditionally animated piece that told the story of how the Loch Ness monster got into the loch in the first place. Either way, it's a nice little reference. Though I have a bit of an issue with this, namely that the name is incredibly redundant. Do you know what loch means? It's Scottish for lake, so that location is literally called Lake Lake. Lake Lake. That's really absurd. Like most teenage boys, Ian has quite a few posters hanging on the wall of his room. One of these many posters is for a band called Muddle of Mush. The name is actually pretty similar to, and more than likely meant as a direct reference to, the new metal band Puddle of Mud. When you really stop and think about it though, referencing this band is kind of odd to see in a kids movie, considering that Puddle of Mud is probably best known for the song She Hates Me, which you would probably immediately recognize when you include a bit of profanity, specifically the F word. And look, there is no way that I'm actually going to say it here on YouTube. I'd get fired real quick. Puns are pretty divisive. Some people really like them, choosing to use them at pretty much every opportunity. Yet there are also others who believe with every bit of their being that using puns should be punished by a swift yet extremely painful death. If you are one of this second group of people, you probably cringed pretty hard if you caught this little Easter egg. One storefront that we see in the film is a place that is called Sword in the Scone, which is a play on the title Sword in the Stone, which itself was an old Disney animated film that told the story of a young King Arthur, as his life is turned upside down after pulling the sword Excalibur from the stone in which it was embedded. It's a classic story, we all know it. But it's a cool little reference to one of my personal favorite Disney films from way back in the day. Highly appreciated. Yet another business that we see in the film is the Burger Shire. This name is of course a reference to Middle-earth, the place where The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings takes place. See, in Middle-earth, the Shire is one of the famous homes of the halfling race, known as hobbits. and specifically the place where both Bilbo and Frodo Baggins began their adventures. And this connection is further solidified by the sign that simply says, Second Breakfast, which of course is a reference to the fact that hobbits famously eat way more meals than most normal people in Middle-earth. You know, life must be sort of interesting for Tom Holland, constantly being cast as awkward, weird little nerd kids in high school. Obviously, his biggest and most recognizable role like this is Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Anyways, the character of Ian actually shares a lot of similar mannerisms with Peter Parker, including the way that they both stand, holding their arms across their chest awkwardly. Tolls are the absolute worst to deal with while you're driving, and the world of Onward has seemed to find a way to make tolls even worse. The toll booths that we see in Onward are actually manned by trolls. Trolls within myths and legends are often found living underneath bridges, only coming out to stop travelers from crossing, often allowing them to do so once they pay some sort of toll or answer a riddle of some kind. So yeah, trolls operating toll booths would be a natural fit. While waiting to pay the toll to the literal bridge troll, in the far background we actually get this film's Pizza Planet reference. For those of you who don't know, since the original Toy Story, every Pixar film has had some sort of reference to the pizza chain, usually through the appearance of a Pizza Planet delivery truck. In Onward, we see a very similar looking truck, though this time it was appropriately renamed Pizza Realm. When we get a look inside the Manicor's Tavern, if you take a look in the background, you can just barely get a glimpse back inside the kitchen, which is where eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that the cook is actually a rat. Now the reference here is probably fairly obvious, but I'll spell it out for those of you who are not paying a ton of attention. The rat chef is of course a reference to the film Ratatouille, which saw a rat and a man teaming up to run a fancy French restaurant. So while he's apparently not working in Paris anymore, at least in the world of Onward, Remy doesn't have to worry about the restaurant getting shut down because there's a rat in the kitchen. Another nice little nod at the tavern is the headwear that the employees have to wear. At first glance, they may just appear to be some rather generic looking, goofy wizard hats, but they are actually meant to resemble the hat that Mickey wore back in the film Fantasia, back when he was the Sorcerer's Apprentice. You know the bit I'm talking about. The part with the dancing mops that gets completely out of hand. It's a classic design for a wizard's hat, and obviously Onward wasn't going to get away without at least featuring them in the background somewhere. We've talked about a few specific Pixar references throughout this video already. You know, the couple of different types of Easter eggs that pretty much every Pixar film has in it somewhere. Well, one super common one is the A113 Easter egg, with the number and letter designation A113 appearing in almost every Pixar film to date in some form. And it does pop up in Onward. In the movie, there's a moment where we hear some chatter over police radio. This chatter includes the line, "We have a 113 in process." You know what else is in every single Pixar film? A single voice actor, John Ratzenberger. In fact, his work within Pixar movies has been so vast that I did a video for this channel specifically on him and where you can find him in the movies. Link for that will be in the description below if you want to watch it after you finish this one. He does indeed once again appear in Onward. This time, he voices the character construction worker Felix, the guy who is trying to stop Barley at the end of the movie. While it is definitely a pretty small role, it is actually awesome to see, or I guess hear, Ratzenberger in a Pixar film once again. The Pixar universe has a lot of random fake brands that they use to fill in for bigger, real-world ones that would be expensive to have featured in a major motion picture. One such brand actually pops up in Onward, specifically the Triple Dent Gum brand. This brand had popped up previously in the Toy Story franchise and Inside Out. Certainly easier and probably cheaper than using Big Red or Double Mint or something like that. You know the whole Pixar theory thing? About how all of the Pixar movies are connected on one major timeline? Well, maybe we should start including some of the non-Pixar 3D animated films in that timeline, since the beginning of the film appears to give us a connection between Onward and Zootopia. You know that sequence with the Gandalf-looking wizard? The hill he is standing on seems to be covered in the Night Howler flowers from Zootopia. It kinda makes us wonder if elves are affected by the intoxicating flowers like the predators are, or if the flowers are somehow created magically.
We all know if there's one thing Pixar loves besides lamps and Luxo balls, it's cramming their movies with subtle things for their fans to find. Today we're going to point out some of the hidden Easter eggs, references, and jokes you might have missed in Toy Story 4. We'll also talk about those terrifying dummies that we wish we had missed, the Bensons, and reveal when they were originally going to show up, and no, it's not just in our nightmares. Before we jump into it, consider checking out our friends over at Behind the Screen when you're done watching. They have a huge selection of videos about theories that walk the line between informative and completely insane. Everyone knows that as part of its goal of amassing all of the greatest intellectual property in the world, Disney now has the rights to the Star Wars franchise. While many fans have mixed feelings about this, one good thing is that we can now see references to our favorite Star Wars characters in Disney films. When our heroes venture inside the pinball machine at the Second Chance Antique Shop, we noticed a few pieces of Star Wars memorabilia among the collectibles. If you looked closely, you might have seen some original Kennar figures of Ben Kenobi and Walrus Man. It's not quite the Star Wars Cantina, but it was still a pretty great Easter egg. We love when a movie can surprise us, but sometimes it's nice to see some tried and true favorites mixed in as well. Kudos to Pixar for making us feel nostalgic whenever we see a Dino Co gas station pop up in a movie. These have been seen in movies in the Toy Story and Cars franchises, and Toy Story 4 is no exception. Where else would Bonnie and her family stop for gas along the way on their pre-kindergarten road trip? You'll notice that in the Toy Story movies, the logo is an Apatosaurus, and in the Cars movies, it's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And for those keeping count, the Dino Co logos at Disney's California Adventure features a Stegosaurus. Of course, we all love seeing Dino Co gas stations, but there's another classic Pixar reference we love even more. In the first Toy Story movie, Andy and his mother enjoy a meal at Pizza Planet, and since then, a Pizza Planet delivery truck has been seen in tons of Pixar movies. So many, in fact, that many fans believe it's a sign that they all take place in the same cinematic universe. But if you were looking for this vehicle on the road in Toy Story 2, you might have been disappointed. We only saw it in a tattooed version located on the ankle of Axel the Carny, who was manning the game where Ducky and Bunny were located. We know that the Toy Story universe has Dino Co gas stations and Pizza Planet restaurants, but some of its other attributes are much more unique and frankly hard to understand. In the early Toy Story movies, we saw that Andy had written his name on the bottom of Woody's foot. This was seen as a sign of affection and a testament to how much Woody meant to him, enough that he would want him returned if he was lost. But apparently Bonnie will just write her name on the bottom of any old toy because she does so to Woody despite clearly not liking him very much. If you're a fan of the classic horror movie The Shining, then you probably noticed quite a few references to it in Toy Story 4. That is, if you weren't too busy wincing at the sight of those positively unsettling ventriloquist dummies. When Woody and Forky first visit the antique store, we hear some creepy music playing on a record player. You might have dismissed this as just an old-timey kind of song, but if you're a horror movie buff, it may have sounded familiar. That song happens to be Midnight, the Stars and You, performed by Ray Noble and his orchestra, a song that also plays during the ballroom scene in The Shining. You might think that including a reference to The Shining in a kids movie is a little bit much, but don't worry, there are way worse references to that terrifying Kubrickian masterpiece. Ducky and Bunny treat us to a variety of different plans, which all seem to feature the two of them attacking a helpless elderly woman. What a family-friendly film this is! During one disturbing scenario, the pair follow the woman home before attacking her while she lays alone in bed. When we see her address, we realize her house number is 237, which is also the number of a particularly terrifying room at the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. The Room 237 homage was also in Toy Story 3, as the garbage truck features RM237 on the license plate. Of course, what would a Toy Story movie be without some big-name voice acting talent? Everyone knows Tom Hanks provides the voice of Woody and Tim Allen is the voice of Buzz Lightyear, but there were some exciting additions to the cast this time around. You probably recognized Keanu Reeves as the voice of Duke Kaboom right away.
Look who jumped 40 school buses and landed back into my life.
But did you happen to hear Betty White as the voice of Bitey White, Bonnie's toy tiger? If you thought the chair relegated to the closet sounded familiar, that's because Cheryl Burnett is played by legendary performer Carol Burnett. Bonnie's rhino, Carl Rhinoceros, is voiced by Carl Reiner, and Meliphant Brooks is voiced by Mel Brooks. These Easter eggs were definitely for the parents. Surprisingly, The Shining isn't the only film by Stanley Kubrick to get a shout-out in the movie Toy Story 4. During a late-night heart-to-heart talk, Woody tells Buzz Lightyear that he lets himself be guided by his inner voice when trying to figure out what to do in certain situations. Of course, he's talking figuratively about his conscience, but Buzz believes he's talking about the actual voice which he hears when his string is pulled. So, when Buzz finds himself in trouble later, he chooses a strategy many of us are familiar with, and that is button mashing. Among his many phrases is one which says,
"Open the pod bay doors."
This is a quote from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. In the real world, a tri-county area just means a place is larger than a small town, but not quite a bustling metropolis. But in the Toy Story franchise, it seems to refer to a specific place because we've seen it pop up again and again. In the movie Toy Story 2, we saw the toys head to Tri-County International Airport in a hijacked Pizza Planet delivery truck to rescue Woody. In Toy Story 3, we learned that Tri-County Sanitation is a company which owns a fleet of garbage trucks and notoriously employs Sid Phillips. And of course, it services the Tri-County landfill, which is where Lotso and Andy toys wind up during the climax of Toy Story 3. In the fourth movie, we see Bonnie's family traveling in a Tri-County RV. Pixar knows its fans are obsessed with their content, so they're always including references to previous movies. While Woody and Bo Peep are catching up, her sheep Billy, Goat, and Gruff present Bo with a variety of items scavenged from the park. One of these is the cap to a grape soda bottle, which looks just like the one from Up. In that movie, this bottle cap was given to Carl by Ellie when they were kids and had a ton of emotional significance. Eventually, he passed it on to Russell as a sign of their friendship. In the real world, we have G.I. Joe action figures, and in Toy Story, we have Combat Carl. We first saw Combat Carl in the first Toy Story movie, but he was getting blown apart by Sid at the time. Rest in peace, soldier. There were some other Combat Carls in Sid's room, or at least pieces of them. Combat Carl's shining moment really came during the Toy Story of Terror special, where the character and his miniature counterpart were featured in a huge part of the plot. During Toy Story 4, we saw some thankfully intact Combat Carl figures, but these ones had a very familiar sounding voice.
Combat Carl would like to introduce you to his 1/3 scale counterpart, Combat Carl Jr.
That's because this Combat Carl is voiced by a real-life Carl, Carl Weathers. He returned to the role after voicing the same toy in Toy Story of Terror. While on the search for Woody, Buzz finds himself captured by an evil carnival employee. Okay, he's probably not evil, he's just a little bit over his job. He affixes Buzz to the prize wall where he earns the ire of his fellow toys, Ducky and Bunny. But action figures and stuffed animals weren't the only things players could win. Some of the less talkative prizes were some miniature instruments which resembled the guitar from the movie Coco. This could have also been some serious foreshadowing that Toy Story 4 was going to make the audience cry at the end just like Coco did. Or maybe that was just us. Now let's go way back to the 1998 movie A Bug's Life. Yes, the movie was released decades ago, we hate to break it to you. The city is made up of a lot of junk, and many of the items are named after the children of writers who worked on the project. These include Juju Litter, Hannah's Bananas, and PJ's Pops, a fictional soda brand. PJ is the son of John Lasseter, who worked on many great Disney and Pixar films such as WALL-E, Ratatouille, and of course the Toy Story franchise. In the antique shop in Toy Story 4, you'll see a few vintage signs advertising PJ's Pop, which is a nod both to PJ and his pop John Lasseter, along with A Bug's Life. Another way back callback is the infamous Luxo ball, which we first saw in the Luxo Jr. short. It's been in tons of Pixar films over the years, including Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles. However, it's probably the most well-known for showing up in Toy Story movies, and you know this one was no exception. When the characters look down upon the Second Chance Antique Shop, you can see the Luxo ball if you look closely. Considering it's been in Pixar movies for so long, it really is an antique at this point, so the inclusion seems fitting. Now let's talk about yet another notable vintage item we saw in the antique shop in Toy Story 4. We all know that our favorite toys have to freeze whenever humans look at them, at least in the Toy Story universe. The jury is still out in the real world. At one point in the movie, the antique shop owner looks over at Woody, who's forced to freeze, but not just in any pose. He grabs an old red telephone and strikes a pose which is quite familiar. There was a time when you weren't a Disney fan unless you had one of these awesome Mickey Mouse phones, which features Mickey holding the phone in this particular way. One of the goofiest and most iconic paintings of all time is dogs playing poker. The piece of art has been done in hundreds of different ways over the years, and it's been spotted in many fictional universes. Toy Story 4 is no exception, and we spotted this painting in the Second Chance Antique Shop, but with some notable differences. More specifically, we spotted Doug, Charles Muntz, and some of the other dogs from the movie Up playing poker this time. Even though the movie features Bonnie and her family going on a road trip, much of the movie takes place in the same spot, the Second Chance Antique Shop. The owner may live in a house with the same room number as a particularly terrifying part of the Overlook Hotel, but her store has a meaningful address as well. Its street number is the number 1200, which is the same street number as Pixar Animation Studios' headquarters. This legendary animation studio is located at 1200 Park Avenue in Emeryville, California, just in case you want to send them any fan mail. In addition to working on the Toy Story franchise, John Lasseter also wrote and directed a short film called Tin Story. It features a tin musician named Tinny who is torn between wanting to be played with and not wanting to be destroyed by a young child. There was a tin toy book on Andy's bookshelf in the first Toy Story which says it's written by Lasseter. He's also seen in Toy Story 2 when Ham is looking for the Al's Toy Barn commercial on TV. In the third movie, some of the toys from the short are hiding under a table at Sunnyside when the kids burst into the Caterpillar room. In Toy Story 4, we see some of the toys from Tin Toy hiding out in the pinball machine located in the antique shop. While you might have heard of Tin Toy, you probably haven't heard of Duke Kaboom before Toy Story 4 was announced. That's because, and we hate to break it to you, he's not based on a real Canadian stuntman. We know, we were crushed too. But if it makes you feel any better, he was voiced by national treasure Keanu Reeves, and he is based on a real stuntman. He's an interesting Canadian interpretation of Evel Knievel, one of the most well-known stuntmen in the world. His white and red Canadian garb is a joking way of addressing Knievel's classic red, white, and blue costume. And back in the 1970s, the Evel Knievel stunt toy was a huge hit among kids, having many of the same features Duke Kaboom also had. So we know Duke Kaboom is a spoof of Evel Knievel, but so are some other aspects of this toy. Even if you're not old enough to remember the heyday of Evel Knievel, you've probably seen an awesome toy commercial on television only to be disappointed when you acquire the actual toy. They did sell Evel Knievel toys, and the commercials featured them performing some utterly amazing stunts, which of course the toys couldn't even come close to. You probably noticed the Evel Knievel reference pretty quickly, but let's see if you spotted this more subtle one. While Woody and Bo Peep are trying to rescue Forky from Gabby Gabby, you can see what looks like a piece of cloth with the phrase Wall-E B written on it. No, Wall-E B isn't related to Wall-E, it's a reference to the short The Adventures of Andre and Wall-E B. If you don't recognize this one, then don't feel too bad, because it was created back before Pixar was Pixar. It was made by the Lucasfilm computer division that would someday become the Pixar we all know and love. We spotted another older movie reference during one of the last scenes in the movie. Duke Kaboom finally managed to land a legitimately impressive jump off of a Ferris wheel, which looked very reminiscent of another notable movie moment. It was similar to the scene in the movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial, directed by Steven Spielberg. In this movie, E.T. and Elliot fly through the sky on a bicycle with the night sky as the backdrop. We were going to say it was refreshing to finally see a classic movie reference that isn't scary, but then we remembered that movie definitely had its share of unsettling moments. Our pal Duke Kaboom did have another notable moment, but this time it came during a mid-credits scene. He listened to Ducky and Bunny go over another one of their elaborate revenge fantasies, and by elaborate, we mean they plan to leap on someone again. But this time, their plan involved laser eyes, which Duke had to question them about. When he was assured of course they have laser eyes, he responded with "whoa," which sounded just like when the voice actor Keanu Reeves said it in The Matrix. Seriously, can we all just agree Keanu Reeves is the absolute best? Here's one huge thing we all missed in the movie Toy Story 4. A short! Usually, at the beginning of Pixar movies, we can count on seeing an animated short of some kind. Sometimes these go on to become quite famous. After all, it's thanks to one of these that we have the classic Luxo Ball. But there wasn't one in the beginning of Toy Story 4, and fans were curious about why it's the first movie since 1995 not to have one. Sure, we got some mid-credit scenes instead, but why the sudden change? Producer Mark Nielsen claims it's a simple matter of limited resources. All the talent was needed to work on the movie as well as some other projects that needed their attention. So if they couldn't create a high-quality short, they decided it would be better to have none at all. Don't worry, we aren't going to end this video on a sad note. We would never do that to you. We're going to end it on a horrifying one by talking about those nightmare puppets one last time. They're known as the Benson in the movie, and they're some of the only toys which can't talk, perhaps because they're made to only speak via a ventriloquist. One piece of fun Toy Story trivia is that Woody was originally going to be such a toy until it was decided it would creep everyone out too much. Hey, it turns out they were definitely right about that. These dummies also bear a striking resemblance to the notoriously unfriendly dummy Slappy from the Goosebumps Night of the Living Dummy series.
The 14 years was worth the long wait to see The Incredibles hit the big screen again, and this time around, Pixar went all out with their visual gags, action scenes, and creative moments. Between all of the explosions and Jack-Jack's impressive range of powers, there are a wide range of small details you probably missed. Let's dive right in and recap them all! Before you watch, click subscribe. You'll join our notification squad and be the first to know of new Screen Rant content.
I want to be normal. The only normal one is Jack-Jack, and he's not even toilet trained.
Enter the Poltergeist. In The Incredibles 2, we learn Jack-Jack has a grand total of 17 powers. A majority of these powers were used in his epic battle with a raccoon, while others were showcased during Mr. Incredible's time while taking care of his infant son. Between flame powers and laser beam eyes, one of the more unique powers was Jack-Jack's ability to literally disappear while still being heard. It seemed as if Jack-Jack entered another realm within the family home and could easily navigate back and forth between the worlds. If you're a horror movie fan, then it probably sounds all too familiar to the classic story of the Poltergeist. A special power Jack-Jack had wasn't used as just a horror movie homage. Bob Parr is voiced by Craig T. Nelson, the same actor who had a starring role in The Poltergeist. The original film was made 36 years ago, and still holds up as one of the great horror movies and one of Craig T. Nelson's most popular roles. The moment in the movie comes and goes pretty quick, but it would be interesting to see the family take on some of the similar monsters and creatures found in the other side, just like in the Poltergeist movie.
See?
Watching TV. The Incredibles takes place in the mid-1960s, as seen through set designs, decor, and color schemes. If the setting and clothing weren't enough, the film takes things one step further with some classic television references from the 1960s as well. The creative minds behind Pixar could have easily come up with fictional shows to showcase on the Par's television, but they decided to take a real piece of pop culture instead. Real television shows were used on the TV, representing some of the most popular hits from the 1960s. The first TV show showcased on the television was The Outer Limits. The anthology show featured tales of science fiction and terror in a similar style to The Twilight Zone. The show first premiered in 1963 and had a remake in the 1990s. The second show featured on their television was the classic cartoon Johnny Quest. The action-adventure series followed a family who went on adventures in very similar vein to the Incredible family. Johnny Quest first premiered in 1964, putting The Incredibles 2 set any time between 1964 and 1965, unless the family happens to watch reruns of both shows. The quick moments help make the family feel more real and grounded as we watch their animated adventures unfold on the big screen.
Look, I'm the Dash. The Dash Light.
Classic Batman. After the 2004 release of the first Incredibles movie, there was an explosion of superhero films. On the DC side, we got to see the whole Dark Knight trilogy and the launch of the DCEU. On Marvel's side, we got to enjoy Iron Man, the MCU, and 3 Avengers films featuring some of the most popular heroes of all time. While there was plenty of material to take homages and parodies from, The Incredibles 2 pretty much stuck in their own lane when it came to superheroes. Out of all the new superhero content available, Brad Bird and the filmmakers decided to focus on the classic Batman show from the 1960s, and starring Adam West. There were multiple homages to the campy classics scattered throughout The Incredibles 2. One of the more obvious were the flashback scenes where homeowners would use their special hero telephones to contact someone when they were in need. The big red phone were a direct homage to Batman's red phone he used for emergencies in the series. And the scenes where Elastigirl emerges from the secret hideout on her motorcycle are extremely similar to the way Batman and Robin drive out of their Batcave in the classic Batmobile.
We appreciate what you did in the old days, but those days are over. From now on, you're on your own.
Ghostbusters. When there's something strange in Incredibles 2, who you gonna reference? Ghostbusters. That's right, The Incredibles 2 has a clever little Ghostbusters reference for huge fans of the original franchise. While we wish it was Jack-Jack taking on Slimer, this reference comes in the form of some similar sounding dialogue. In Incredibles 2, Elastigirl manages to catch the Screenslaver, but he turns out to be nothing but an ordinary pizza delivery worker. Not convinced he is the real Screenslaver, Evelyn tells her that even Einstein was a patent clerk. If the random tidbit and quote sounded familiar, it's because nearly the exact same line was used in the original Ghostbusters movie starring Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. In Ghostbusters, Ray and Peter discuss losing jobs, and Peter uses the Einstein fact to try and convince him everything will be okay. And of course, things do work out in the end as the duo teams up with some friends to form the Ghostbusters we know and love. Maybe Disney will acquire the Ghostbusters at some point in the future and mix the franchise into the Disney animation fold or even the MCU. We've seen stranger things happen. Up in the clouds. With 14 years between movies, Pixar and digital animation has gone through many changes and impressive upgrades. In The Incredibles 2, a whole new system was created for more realistic hair. The costumes look more detailed, and explosions feel more real than ever. From start to finish, The Incredibles 2 is a visual treat with some of the best animation we've seen from Pixar. Not only did the movie create a lot of their own animation, but the animators drew inspiration from other Pixar films. One area where you can see their influence is in the clouds. And no, we're not talking about one of the planes Elastigirl flies in the movie. We're talking about the literal clouds. The clouds used in Incredibles 2 were taken directly from The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur may not have been Pixar's biggest hit, but the film had truly spectacular animation, something that stuck with the same animators working on The Incredibles 2. If you match cloud shots, you will notice a lot of similarities as the clouds add a nice beauty and depth to any exterior scene. Something as insignificant as clouds may not seem like a big deal, but it's all these little details that help make the movie look and feel so authentic.
Ow! Violet, it's not my fault!
A date at the movies. After dealing with anxiety and shyness in her social life, Violet finally gets her happy ending in a form of a date near the end of Incredibles 2. While many will be watching Violet get close to her date, others will be checking out the movie marquee and the film they are going to see. The fictional film title actually has two Easter egg connections, one that has to do with a classic Pixar Easter egg and another with popular films in the 1960s. The numbers in the film title, Dementia A113, refers to the classic Pixar A113 Easter egg. This is the number of a classroom located at the California Institute of Arts. The classroom was a popular place for many of Pixar's early animators, as they learned digital animation and the skills needed to make the company what it is today. Other film companies like Lucasfilms have also used the A114 Easter egg in several movies. The dementia part of the movie title refers to the classic horror film Dementia 13. Originally released in 1963, the movie fits perfectly into the Incredibles 2 timeline. Directed by Francis Ford Coppola, Dementia 13 is a classic horror slasher with a mystery killer who is not revealed until the end. The film is probably a little intense for a young Violet, but she has taken on some of the world's biggest villains, so a fictional horror film shouldn't be too hard.
Bon voyage.
C'est incroyable!
And Incrediboy!
Saving the train. As Elastigirl attempts to redeem the public image of superheroes, one of the biggest steps she takes is a moment where she must stop a high-speed train from going off the rails. The train scene is intense and makes the most of her stretching ability as she reaches outward and tries to slow the train down. If the action scene felt similar, it is a direct from another classic superhero film, Spider-Man 2. In Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock sends a train to its ultimate death, and it's up to Peter Parker and his spider webs to stop it. Spider-Man launches out a series of anchoring webs and uses all his strength to slow the train down. The intense final moments are extremely similar to Elastigirl's rescue scene. The connection is even stronger because both The Incredibles and Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004. Whether the homage and matching release years were intention remains to be seen. Another similar scene takes place in Spider-Man Homecoming, but this time the train is replaced with a large ferry getting split in half. The classic scene is a great way to show off their powers and determination to save everyone at all costs.
Edna mode. And gas.
Jack Jack and Mozart. As Jack Jack reveals all of his powers, a lot of them seem pretty random and crazy. There are some moments which become a lot more intense than others. If you pay close attention, there may be a special trigger to these out-of-control powers. The trigger is not cookies or tantrums, but in fact the classical music composer, Mozart. In The Incredibles 2, Edna Mode talks about how much Jack Jack reacts to Mozart, clearly in a negative way. The reference has a direct connection to the Incredibles short film Jack Jack Attack. While Jack Jack is being babysat, Baby Mozart music is used in an attempt to help calm him and keep him distracted. Once the Mozart is used, you see Jack Jack's complete opposite reaction to the music as he erupts into flames, turns into a little monster, and surely gives the babysitter a run for her money. The same Mozart connection in The Incredibles 2 is a great way to connect the movies and showcase ways Jack Jack uses his crazy collection of powers. Thankfully, Edna was able to make a suit to help control them. Can you imagine the baby's crazy reaction with him getting on an elevator while Mozart is playing? The opening scenes. Despite the 14-year difference, The Incredibles 2 picks up right where the film left off. Literally. After Dash's second-place finish in the track meet, the family gets confronted by an evil villain known as the Underminer. Does he sound familiar? If you've seen any other Pixar film, then you know why. The Underminer is played by none other than John Ratzenberger. The famed star of Cheers voices a character in each movie and reprised his role as the Underminer for The Incredibles 2. Of course, the Underminer is a great comic book homage to Marvel. The Mole Man is a classic Marvel Comics villain who appeared in the very first Fantastic Four comic book. Of course, the powers of the Parr family have often been compared to the Fantastic Four, making the use of the Underminer even more fitting. While there is no post-credits scene in The Incredibles 2, the Underminer does make a brief return through a short animation showing the villain tunneling with his giant machine. If The Incredibles comes back for a second sequel, you can expect to hear John Ratzenberger and see the Underminer battle with the family of heroes once more. Maybe this time the family will be strong enough to finally defeat him.
Honey!
What?
Where's my super suit?
With the arrival of Pixar's Coco, we have a whole movie to hunt through looking for hidden clues, clever moments, and references which may be hard to spot right away. Like many other Pixar films, Coco is filled with classic Pixar Easter eggs, references to other Pixar movies, and a look at the future. Let's hop on board and go over some of the best hidden gems found in the movie. Before you watch, click subscribe. You'll join the notification squad and be the first to know of new content. Also, can you guess which movie is represented by these emoji? Stay tuned at the end to find out. The hidden piñatas. Piñatas are a Mexican tradition, and it's only natural to see them hanging in the streets for celebration or sold by street vendors. As young Miguel runs through the streets of his village, there are numerous colorful piñata designs to look at. Take a closer look on the right side and you'll spot some of Pixar's most well-known characters. On the surface, there's a clear view of Woody and Buzz Lightyear. Woody hangs in the forefront while Buzz hangs just below him with his wings out. There are even multiple versions of both Woody and Buzz piñatas available for sale. This reference was clearly placed in there to give a hint at the future release of Toy Story 4, which has been pushed back to 2019. Tucked in behind them, you can spot another Pixar favorite, Mike from Monsters Inc. and Monsters University. The Mike piñata was probably just a colorful character that made sense to add. It could also be a reference to the rumored Monsters Inc. television show currently in development over at Pixar. While these creations are purely digital, chances are there have been thousands of children who bashed in Toy Story and Monsters Inc. piñatas for birthdays and holiday celebrations.
Hola.
Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo was a fun adventure in the 2003 Pixar film. Now the title has a whole different meaning when watching Coco. Were you able to find the colorful clownfish? The filmmakers actually gave you two different chances to do so. The first can be spotted inside Miguel's house as his grandma tries to shut down any form of music. Just after she hangs up a picture frame, look for a glass jar in the bottom right corner of the screen, sitting out of water and on top of the jar. It appears as if Nemo is actually the jar topper and used to lift the lid open. The second Easter egg is a little harder to spot. It comes in a scene just seconds after the first. He stops by a table selling small alebrije. These are Mexican decorations featuring hybrid fantastical creatures often designed in bright colors. Nemo joins the collection of creatures as a small fish-like design on the far left corner. The scene zooms by pretty quick, but some of the other collectibles on the table include resemblances to characters like Marlin and Dory.
Who's ready for some música?
El Santo returns. Mexican culture is filled with a lot of celebrities and well-known personalities. Any older generations going to see the film will easily remember the Mexican celebrity known as El Santo. El Santo was a masked luchador wrestler who transitioned into a famed actor known for some crazy action films. In those movies, his wrestling moves and talents would be used to win over opponents. El Santo is pretty easy to spot in Coco, as he wears his signature lucha mask. He appears in numerous scenes and jokes are made by the character. Back in 1970, El Santo starred in the film Land of the Dead, which serves as one of the main locations for Coco. Even though the locations may be similar, the movies are very different. El Santo's version features an evil witch, his friend the Blue Demon, and an open heart surgery on one of the main characters. Not exactly Pixar material. Nonetheless, it's great to see such a Mexican legend get honored in Coco. Just like in real life, El Santo wears his mask the whole film, a time-honored Mexican tradition El Santo kept up his whole life. The Devil Box and Pixar's origins. The Land of the Dead not only features people who passed away, but it features all types of old technology. Piles of books adorn offices, and there's no tablets or Kindles in sight. Some of the characters use walkie-talkies instead of cell phones. When visiting an office to reunite family members, take a close look at the computers the characters use. The old-fashioned computer designs are actually based off of some of the original Mac computers. One character even slams the thing and refers to it as Devil's Box when not operating correctly. The Mac computers weren't placed there randomly or as product placement, and specifically former Apple CEO Steve Jobs. When Pixar first started, Jobs saw the vision for the animation company and went all in with them. In 1986, he paid $5 million for Pixar. He gave them a big animation budget and the company was born. Several years later, the whole movie business would change with the release of Toy Story. These computers represent Jobs' dedication to the company, how far technology has grown, and how far Pixar has come as a company. The little nod in Coco is great and added layers to the story at the same time.
Falsifying a unibrow? That's illegal? Very illegal.
Pizza Planet Truck. Another Pixar movie, another pizza truck. We've seen enough of these to want them arriving at our front door with a fresh and delicious pizza already. Coco had an advantage over other Pixar films because cars and trucks were a natural part of the story. In other Pixar movies like Brave and WALL-E, the animators had to get a little creative when hiding the pizza truck around. This time they had the luxury of allowing it to speed down the street. Miguel's grandmother tried to keep all forms of music out of Miguel's life. This included any random music he would hear at his home. During one point, he looks out a window when a truck zooms by playing music. Naturally, the grandmother slams the window shut while exclaiming, "No music." Did you spot it? That's right, the loud, music-blaring truck was the official Pizza Planet vehicle, speeding away to its next delivery destination. The best part about this reference is the truck never changes. Always the same color, same Pizza Planet logo, and the worn-off stickers to spell "Yo" on the film. Occurring nice and early in the film, ending the hunt allowed many viewers to sit back and enjoy the rest of the movie instead of playing a game of I Spy.
You gotta stay with me, boy.
Luxo Ball. If you loved searching for the Pizza Planet truck, then you must love hunting down the Luxo Ball. The yellow and blue ball with the signature red star is a part of the original Pixar animations, and it's become a hidden gem in several movies. It's no different here, but pretty hard to spot. During a scene, Dante chases a monkey-styled alebrije all around. Look closely in the background and you could spot the Luxo Ball sitting casually on the table. It would have been fun to see the ball get knocked down and become part of the scene, but the quick moment is still fun to spot. This isn't the only time a Luxo Ball appears in Coco footage. Before the movie came out in theaters, the animators released a short entitled Dante's Lunch. In the clip, Dante chases a living bone as it drags him through different areas. Dante crashes through a number of street vendor displays. One of these is a display selling luchador masks. Just before Dante crashes through the whole stand, you can spot a mask styled just like the Luxo Ball. It features a yellow base, blue trim, and a star right in the center. The clever transformation blended nicely in the film. Lightning McQueen. The Coco short Dante's Lunch may have only been a couple of minutes long, but it found some extra time to load up on more Pixar references to earlier films. As Dante chases a bone through the Mexican streets, he zooms past a young boy eating corn on the cob on a stick. The treat is a nice nod to Mexican culture, but don't let it distract you. Look down at his feet and you'll see a familiar looking pair of shoes. The young boy is wearing a pair of Lightning McQueen shoes from Cars 3. If the shoes don't appear to have McQueen's trademark red design, this is was for good reason. The shoes showcase McQueen's paint job at the end of Cars 3. In the movie, McQueen transitions from driver to pit crew leader and changes his paint job to match. His blue paint is inspired by Doc Hudson, the legendary racer who trained McQueen. The shoe selection was a nice nod to Cars 3, the last Pixar film to get released before Coco. The shoes actually look like a pair young boys would purchase at a local big box store. The design and Velcro fastener are all too familiar and surprisingly accurate.
You keep away from him.
Room A113. Another Pixar movie and another chance to hunt for the famous A113 sighting. For those unaware, A113 represents the classroom at the California Institute of Arts where so many animators and creators got their start in the business. In the past, Pixar has featured this code on license plates, electronics, and in hidden signs. One of the main franchises it's been seen in is Toy Story. Andy's mom drives a car with the A113 license plate. For Coco, they didn't make it too challenging to figure out. In the film, there's a part taking place at the Department of Family Reunions. Look closely at the door and you can spot the infamous A113 right on the glass. In some shots, you can see this straight on. In others, you'll have to look through the glass and read the text backwards. The use of the A113 has been used as a door in a number of other animations as well. You can spot it on a door in the Rugrats Season 1 episode Little Dude. The same thing is found in the BoJack Horseman episode entitled Downer Ending. It may seem like a small Easter egg, but it's created a life all on its own throughout multiple types of animation.
Hola, Miguel. Hola.
The Incredibles poster. Even before Coco was released, fans have already been heavily looking forward to the release of The Incredibles 2. 15 years in the making, The Incredibles is one of the most beloved films in Pixar's filmography, and fans are eagerly anticipating the sequel. To get fans even more excited, the Coco filmmakers snuck a little Incredibles Easter egg into the film. As Miguel and Hector walk towards the Sunrise concert looking for hanging posters on the side of the building, one of the posters is an original one-sheet from The Incredibles. The animated movie poster features the iconic black logo with the lowercase letter I surrounded by a circle. Either the Land of the Dead gets really delayed movies, or The Incredibles is having some sort of reissue similar to Pixar movies of the past. Maybe it's in preparation of an Incredibles marathon. Nothing would be better than reliving The Incredibles and then following it up with the sequel. Either way, the detail was enough to add a little extra excitement to the already exciting movie. Although it would have been even better to see a Land of the Dead syndrome wandering around, we'll settle with the poster for now.
Hear me. I wish someone wanted to hear me. Other than you.
Sid's shirt. The character of Sid has always been interesting to Pixar fans, and Coco added a little more to his dynamic. After the toy-destroying punk appeared in the first Toy Story, he disappeared from the second film until making a cameo appearance in the third as a garbage man. If things turned out the way it seems in Coco, then Sid could actually be dead before Toy Story lands in theaters. Or maybe it was just a fun Easter egg they decided to plant in. During a concert in the Land of the Dead, a character appears on stage with a Black Skull t-shirt on. The shirt is a clear replica of Sid's trademark design he wore in the original Toy Story. It just so happens the shirt design matches the style and designs in the Land of the Dead perfectly. Now, whether the person is actually Sid or not brings up a huge debate. If it is Sid, how did he die? Were toys involved? Will this be touched upon in the next Toy Story movie? We're likely reading way too much into it, but the fun moment left fans speculating and wondering what happened to the bad boy we knew so well in Toy Story.